Hey folks, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I guess is relevant and timely right now because Peter Coffin said some stuff on Twitter about Gamergate. People have been responding to it, but this ties into what I've been thinking about Manuel Levinas's recently. I've already talked about otherization and totalization and essentialism. All of these are interrelated concepts, and even when talking about those concepts, I use the word reductivism, all right? I wanted to talk about that in the context of what Peter said, because basically what Peter was saying is that we can't ever forget that something like Gamergate, and for those who don't know, it was just a bunch of drama basically having to do with gamers who were really upset about identity politics, feminism, social justice entering, their safe place of gaming, where, that's the typical way that we talk about it anyways, that it was a bunch of reactionary teenage boys who were being catered to by an emergent industry of anti-SJW types, the Gavin McInnes and Ben Shapiro types, who wanted to be like, oh yes, not only is feminism wrong for calling your video games patriarchal, misogynist fantasies, but they're also no more intelligent than those people who say that video games are causing violence. And so it was always very reductive. It was always basically saying, oh, feminism is stupid, feminism is bad, and video games are good and you shouldn't have to take any criticism, blah, blah, blah. There was a bit of a cultural skirmish, and some people lived through the heat of it. Others of us, like myself, avoided it like the plague because we just didn't want to have anything to do with it. But what Peter said in the tweet is very important, and that was that we can't forget the role that capitalism plays in creating the conditions, or the environment, one might say, of the alienation in the first place that these youth were trying to do something about, trying to fulfill through their video game playing and their identity formation in respect to the whole Gamergate situation, the hellstorm. That's not in any way an excuse of any of the vile and atrocious behavior of Gamergaters who were slandering and harassing and all of this stuff. Feminists, sending death threats, sending dead animals, doxing, spreading lies. Nothing ever justifies that kind of behavior. But there's a difference between an explanation and a justification. To say that capitalist alienation is a huge factor, if not like one of the primary factors, because we live in capitalism, is not a justification of anything. It's just providing the overall context. Basically, most people are super alienated in this society. Some people feel that a lot more than other people, especially people who aren't super privileged and plugged into rich, meaningful, purposeful, real social networks that provide, meaningful opportunities. If your basic options being provided for you are, grow up, never own anything, be a perpetual renter who's working 70 hours a week until you retire and die, alienated from your family and loved ones because you never had the time, energy, or attention to pool with them in any meaningful way, or to contribute to your society in any meaningful way beyond your limiting specialist career. That's the kind of alienation that drives people into the despair and into the kinds of communities that form for people like incels or men going their own way or anything like that. That is a huge factor. It could even be like the main factor. This is a structural condition argument. But anyway, what people ended up doing was saying that, one, Peter Coffin was justifying their behavior, which an explanation is not a justification, and two, saying that he was saying toxic masculinity had nothing to do with this, or or you get people coming in saying, this is completely about toxic masculinity, or this is completely about misogyny, and to make it about anything else is a huge problem, and blah blah blah. You're just giving in to the Gamergaters. This is reductivism at its finest. You've essentialized your understanding of why people do things. People are already complex. They have lots of reasons that are conscious and unconscious. And then there are the environmental / structural conditions that frame how they're going to navigate the social field in the first place and provide them with the resources and knowledge that they use when navigating that social field. That's all factors that any kind of reductivist explanation is going to do a violence to. In Levinas's sense, this kind of a reduction that takes a single cause, an ideologically motivated cause, as the only reason why something or someone happens or does what they do, it's very simplistic. It only makes sense to people who already agree with you, and it's ignorant because it's always like this. Oh, well, we already have the answer. The answer is, let's say, toxic masculinity. There's no other explanation needed, and that not only confirms where I've been and what I've thought all along, but it also just means that everyone else is wrong. Rather than trying to understand how there are a lot of factors that are always playing into any given picture of the whole. And so I will just, at the end here, say, if you're still trying to wrap your head around the difference between reductivism, well, if you're thinking, what is reductivism? Just think of it in opposition to holism. Holism is the idea that our experience of the world is made up of a lot of different factors that are irreducible to any one given cause or any one given explanation, and that any form of analysis that does try to provide explanation for why things are the way they are it's an analytic tool that requires a reduction. So that you could reduce the world to its biological components, its chemical components, its physical components, or you could reduce it to its purely economic factors, or you could reduce it to historical explanations. Any one of these reductions, or use gender as your reductive explanation. Yeah. All of these are components of the whole, of the holistic fabric of real embodied lived experience. But real embodied lived experience is a pre-analytic thing or a phenomenon. Pre-scientific, pre-analytic means that the sciences and any form of analysis or explanation is going to be more or less helpful than others, but never give you that full picture itself, because that full picture is this. And then the analysis chooses which parts of all of this to hone in on, right? So this, the real, whatever the real situation is, whatever the real event occurring might be, is not reducible to the way that you are conceptually mapping it, because conceptual mapping is a way of bringing some things into more focus to the exclusion of other things, which can be super helpful depending on what our purposes are. But this is before that, and it remains after that analysis. So there is no final analysis. There's only the whole, and then we can have pieces of it. But those pieces are always reductions, they're always totalizations, and totalizations always miss out the bigger thing, the bigger reality that is always overflowing. The whole is always overflowing. The actual whole is always overflowing these reductions. Conceptual reductions are maps, and the whole, the real, that's the territory The map is not the territory. We'll talk about this a lot more, but there you go. Take care.